Welcome back to Turning Hard Times into Good Times. I'm your host, Jay Taylor. I'm really pleased to have with me for the first time Franklin Sanders. Franklin, after spending 2 years in the U.S. Army, he attended graduate school at Tulane and the Free University in Berlin. And in 1980, he opened a gold and silver brokerage firm and began publishing the Money Changer newsletter. And I would suggest you jot this URL down. The site you need to go to check up on all that Franklin is doing and what he has done in the past as well is the-moneychanger.com, the-moneychanger.com. And in 1990, Franklin and 15 other people were indicted in federal court for conspiracy to delay and defeat the IRS and willful failure to file income tax returns because he had opened a gold and silver bank and had not filed income tax returns since 1975. In July 1991, a jury found him and all other defendants not guilty on all charges on a related state charge fomented by the IRS. Franklin lost, but his incarceration completely failed to rehabilitate him. He's a stubborn character, evidently. In 2012 and 2013, he published volumes 1 and 2 of a book called At Home in Dogwood Mudhole, recounting his family's move from the city to the farm. And you can follow up on that work as well by going to dogwoodmudhole.com. Franklin is an ordained presbyter in the Reformed Episcopal Church and pastors Christ Our Hope Church in West Point, Tennessee. And as he is the author of several books in addition to the one I just noted. I should also tell you that Franklin is also a very savvy investment advisor. And time permitting today, although I'm afraid we're not going to have enough time to go very far with this today, I'm really hoping to get his ideas on the markets and also how we can face the difficulties that most certainly lie ahead, the things we talk about on this show almost every week. Well, Franklin, thanks so much for taking your valuable time to chat with us today. It's good to have you.
I'm glad to be here.
Really good to talk to you. I've known you for many years, and I ran across a book just recently that you sent me, and you inscribed inside the book. A very courageous man who stood up for what was right against the Nazis in World War II. And it's a very inspirational book, but your life is very inspirational. So we'd like to also get into that a little bit. You know, some 48 years ago, just before you were married, you picked up a book on the drugstore shelf, and it was written by none other than Alan Greenspan. And it really sort of changed the direction of your life in a major way. The book was titled Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. Can you summarize the thesis of Dr. Greenspan's book and how that really changed your thinking and the direction of your life?
Well, the main thing was that Greenspan made just an irrefutable case for the gold standard, for gold, and argued that the only honest money, the only money that could stand up was gold. I would add silver to that today, but that was an idea that just took hold of my mind, and I guess you could say sound money has been one of the threads or forces pushing me down the road the rest of my life. I was just astounded, and of course, you know, I picked up a lot of Ayn Rand's philosophy out of the same book.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, that would be a topic for another day, frankly, because I know that you are not an atheist, you are a Christian man, and so how to reconcile the two would be a topic I'd love to chat with you about, maybe not on the air, but sometime personally. But let's go further because our time is so limited. Upon graduating from college, you spent 2 years in the Army. Then in 1969, you attended graduate school in Germany and in Tulane University, as we just noted, followed by more college at Free University in West Berlin. What impact did these early post-high school years have on your thoughts? I mean, in addition to Greenspan's book, did they also played a role in your thought process as you evolved into adulthood?
Oh, absolutely. Those were the Vietnam War years. Mm-hmm. And I had gone into the Army after I got out of college with these stars in my eyes, and I had been in the Army about 3 or 4 nanoseconds before I figured out what a mistake I had made and how misled I had been. I spent 2 years in the Army and then got out and went to graduate school in German at Tulane, and then managed to get a scholarship to go to the Free University for a year. Well, you have to understand, West Berlin at that time was still an island in the middle of Soviet-controlled East Germany.
Sure.
And so on the one side of the wall, you had, in fact, they put up the wall not long before I got there. But on the one side of the wall, you had this vibrant city where everything in the world was available, and on the other side of the wall, even at the hot dog stands out in the street, there were lines, and they were out of hot dogs. So it was the most astounding picture of the difference between capitalism and socialism you could possibly imagine, and it was also the most astounding lesson in the importance of being free and the importance of maintaining that freedom. All the time while we were there, the East Germans actually installed electric eyes on the wall connected to machine guns because the guards couldn't be trusted to shoot every single time.
Huh.
And so people were willing to make, I mean, here you have this picture in front of you constantly where people are being killed trying to get out of this socialist workers' paradise and across the wall into some kind of freedom. So you can't, you have to, an experience like that stays with you forever.
Right. It sure did. And the combination of Greenspan's book and that experience then led you on to, after you left Germany, then came back to the States. And about that time, I guess you were getting married as well, or you would soon get married. But the first thing you did when you came back was you opened your gold and silver business. You opened a gold and silver business, that is, I guess, about that time when you came back into the States. And the first thing you did was to write a letter and send a certified letter to the Arkansas Attorney General to explain why you believed, based on your understanding of law, the U.S. law, that exchanges of gold and silver money for paper money were not, in fact, or should not, in fact, be subject to sales tax. Can you explain to our listeners the logic behind that view?
Well, any of your listeners can go in any state they live in, and they can go look up the law of money, and they're going to find out that somewhere in their Constitution or somewhere in their statutes, there will be some kind of statement that says nothing but gold and silver or money. It's just universal, and that's indeed, when you look for a definition of money in the Arkansas statutes, you're going to find money is defined as gold and silver coin. There's a difference between money and notes. And these are universal. These are laws that are universally held both in the federal and the state law. The problem is they're ignored. And I couldn't understand why they were ignored. So that
so you weren't
off on a trip through the law, which is can be like Never Never Land.
Yeah, so you weren't ignoring them, and you were really sort of kicking the authorities in the shins and saying, wake up, this is what your law says. But how did the Arkansas, do you believe that that's still true today? I mean, it's just as true today as it was then. That's in terms of what's on the statutes.
Oh, no question. But here's the way they respond. Silence. They refuse to answer a question they can't answer. You ask them a question they can't answer. If you ask them, what does it mean where the Constitution says no state shall make anything but gold or silver coin a tender in payment of debt? And what does that make a tender? What is the tender in this state? They just go silent, or else they throw you in jail because they can't answer the question. Yeah. If they answer the question, then they're going to be the first judge or the first official in the country that says, "Hey, the emperor has no clothes.
Yeah,
the monetary emperor is naked." And we're in contravention of the law in the way that we operate. So
what would happen to that judge if he did that?
Oh, well, he'd be laughed out of the country, even though it's true. You understand? Even though it's true, but he'd be laughed out of the country.
Mm-hmm. So your letter to the Arkansas Attorney General, you lived in Arkansas at that time. It was ignored then, I guess.
Right. And in fact, several letters were ignored. And then finally they wrote me a letter that said, we don't answer letters. And basically, it said, well, we don't give legal opinions. Well, certainly they give legal opinions.
Yeah.
But they refused to do it. And so about a year later, somebody from the Revenue Department showed up and wanted to see all of my books. And I said, well, I've got a confidentiality guarantee with these people I do business with. So if you'll,
Sure.
if you'll, immunize me from that, if you'll give me a contract immunizing me from any holding me harmless from any suit they might come up with, and that would be fine. No, they couldn't do that. Well,
They couldn't do that.
So so anyway, they sent me a big bill for back taxes, $120,000.
Yeah,
and then,
that was a lot of money back then, Frank, and it still is. But at that time, especially thinking back on how much the purchasing power of the dollar has eroded, that was a lot of money then.
Oh, absolutely. So I did the only thing that I could do. I fled. I fled, moved to Tennessee, and of course they look at that as criminal. I looked at it as the only sensible thing I could do. But the laws are still there. None of that's changed. Although what has changed is in a lot of states, the sales tax they've passed laws that specifically exempt silver and gold from sales tax. My argument, and I believe what the law says, is that there's never been any tax. It's not that they're exempt from the tax; they're not subject to the tax because money is not subject to sales tax. For instance, if you go to the bank, to the bank and you give them a 20 and they give you 2 10s back, they don't give you a 10, a 5, a 1s, and the change for the sales tax.
Right.
Because it's an exchange of money for money. And the
Yes.
fact is, gold and silver are money. There are even cases in the United States, from the United States Supreme Court, that say that the money doesn't have to be stamped as coin. It's money because it's gold and silver.
Sure.
So I'm not as, to some people this sounds lunatic, but it's not. And I spent hundreds of hours in the law library studying it, and the deeper I went down the rabbit hole, the crazier things got, because the more certain I was that I was absolutely correct.
Well, I guess it just goes to show you that you can be correct, but if the guys with the guns say you're not, then you're not, I suppose, is one way of looking at it.
That's exactly the way they run the country. The rule of law is dead. You just haven't run into, I say to most people, you just haven't run into it yet. They just haven't needed to get you out of the way yet.
Yeah.
So,
well, we've all run into it without knowing it, perhaps, but that's another story. So when you went to Tennessee, you started a bank, a gold and silver bank. What did it do? What was the function?
Well, the idea was that we had this right to gold and silver money, but there was no interface between the gold and silver system and the paper system. There was no easy, cheap way to interface. So I started a gold and silver bank to do just that. And that brought me to the attention of the Internal Revenue Service, and so they began investigating me in 1986. And the real reason that they were doing that was that I had done some work with a fellow out in Colorado who had a similar kind of setup, because I was interested technically in how he did things, and they jumped from him to me, and which is the way they operate, and because they like to double team people that they identify as troublemakers, they took this fellow from the IRS and retired him and sent him to work for the state with a brief of finding something to get on me.
Interesting. Yeah.
And remember, you're not paranoid if they really are after you. And I've got plenty of proof that they really were after me. So they were double teaming me the whole time. What happens to you is once you get under IRS investigation, then they go and get your bank records. Back at that time, the bank had to let you know, and you had a chance to challenge it in court. Now, that's not the case. Now they can go to the bank and say, I want Jay Taylor's records, and that bank will puke out records until the cows come home, and they'll never tell you a word about it.
Never tell me, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. Well, those are part of our liberties that have been eroded in the protection against government, but go ahead.
Well, you have no privacy. That's just it.
Yeah.
You have no privacy. So then what they do is they begin to ruin your life. they begin to soften you up. And the process is to soften you up so that by the time that they indict you, which may be 3 or 4 years off, your life will be so destroyed that you won't even try to fight. So they get the names of all of your customers off of the checks that they get from the bank, and then they send all of them customers on the stationery of the grand jury, telling them that they've got to turn over all this information to this IRS agent. And you can imagine that does not make customers enthusiastic about doing business with you.
No, it must have hurt your business horribly.
You just about evaporated it. That's right.
Yeah.
And so you have to add that. And let me go back and correct one thing. My wife and I have been married actually since we were 20. So we went to Germany together and came back.
Oh, together. Okay.
Yeah, and she's done all this with me, and she's the most astounding person I've ever met. She just took all this in stride, and
wow.
Anybody she certainly would have been justified if she'd turned to me and said, in the midst of all this trouble, pointed her finger at me and said, "This is your fault. You're the one that caused all this."
Yeah.
Which would not have been true, but sure would have been human and understandable, but she never did anything like that. And then, of course, they indicted her, too. But they jumped, in their investigation, they jumped from me to the church I attended.
Right.
Which was,
why the church? How does that figure in?
Well, there was a disgruntled member of the church who decided that he knew they were investigating me, and he went to the it's a long story, but he went to the IRS, and he literally made up stories. He just made up stuff. It was crazy. And the thing is that they want to believe these government people want to believe the worst thing they can possibly believe about you, and so this just escalated their certainty that we must be up to something terrible. So finally, in the end, they jumped from me to the church. They demanded all of the church's records, which, at that time we were in the Presbyterian church, and the church anyway has a 2,000-year history of fighting the intrusion of the government. Oh. And so they of course got mad because the church wouldn't turn over documents to them, and they wanted everything. They wanted the counseling, not just financial records. You have to understand, they wanted the counseling records. They wanted everything. Wow. And so the elders of the church refused to do that, and in return, the IRS had my pastor and assistant pastor, and I think 10 or 11 people out of the church indicted.
Wow. Okay, and then in 1990, the IRS sent in a SWAT team, I guess, to terrorize you and arrest you and your wife. And tell us a little bit about that.
Well, you know that they always want to do what they call the perp walk on you. The perpetrator walk. That is, they want to walk you in front of the cameras in chains, so that everyone who sees that will be scared to death. Oh gosh, if I don't file my income tax returns, they'll do that to me. Yeah, and they like to do that as the tax season begins. And this was January the 9th, 1990. They've been investigating me since 1986, so they knew that I was not violent in the least, and that there was absolutely no danger. And yet, with what I consider to be criminal negligence for the safety of my family, I had 7 children, 15 and under, and my wife, they sent a SWAT team out there. And it's quite an
my goodness,
it's quite an experience. My wife was sitting in we had a big picture window and a long driveway, and so here all the white Plymouths come. Used to they all drove white Plymouths, and all the nice government men all drove nice white Plymouths, and so they come roaring up the driveway. This is about 7:00 in the morning, 7:30, and my wife was in the kitchen fixing breakfast, and I heard her say, I was in the bathroom shaving, and I heard her say, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, it looks like the IRS is here this morning, kids. Don't be afraid. They couldn't be here if God had not sent them. And,
interesting.
There was just there was an enormous, it was just as if God had cast an enormous calm over the whole place.
Interesting.
So then we were all we were all arrested, and I had no idea what was going on. I had no idea that they had this conspiracy carnival going on, but it was kind of like Old Home Week when I got to the to the jail cell downtown because I saw
all the church people.
Yeah, I said, "Well, look at this. We're going to have a meeting here," and but that's just about as low. That's about as depressing a place as you can be, having been arrested, and they put into your hands this 72-page indictment that's literally an inch thick. They had indicted 24 people, 23 besides me. And the theory was that we had this grand conspiracy to defeat the IRS by means of this gold and silver bank.
I see.
And which was preposterous. That was never the reason that was done. But in any event, they had the way they charge in a conspiracy. There's the hub, and then the people outside the hub. And they had me and my wife, me, and a fellow named Michael Osborne, who was my partner in the bank. They had us down for 19 years apiece. We were facing 19 years apiece. Michael was facing 21 for some reason. My wife didn't know anything about my business. She worked there sometimes answering the phone, but she's homeschooling 7 kids. What in the world does she
how does she have time to get involved with crime?
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. Well, what we have only, my engineer's telling me, only about 4 minutes, so we got to move along here. You were exonerated, I think, on all counts. Everybody was deemed not guilty as you went to trial by jury, right?
Right, but it lasted a long time. Yeah.
How long?
Well, it lasted from the middle of February until the 9th of July. So exactly a year and a half to the day after we'd been arrested, we were all acquitted.
And the charges again were what?
Willful failure to file income tax returns, conspiracy to delay and defeat the IRS and the function of its duties. I think there were 3 counts of willful failure.
Yeah.
And of course, the whole defense that we had was there is no statute that makes anybody liable to pay the tax. And there is. I mean, there is not.
There is not.
If you look at the wine tax or the machine gun tax, there's somebody specified. This is the person who has to pay the tax. The only person who has to pay the income tax is a foreign withholding agent.
Okay.
So anyway, the IRS couldn't bring the law into the court. The judge couldn't bring the law into the court. The prosecution couldn't bring the law into the court because it doesn't exist.
Okay, and so you were exonerated, but that wasn't the end of your troubles because the IRS still had its eyes on you, or it seems as though that was the case, and so you were thrown back into the Tennessee dispute then again, weren't you?
Right, because they had me indicted in Tennessee, but I was the only one indicted in Tennessee. One of their big mistakes tactically was that they had indicted so many people that they couldn't do the very fast trial they like to do, where they just kind of pull the wool over the jury's eyes, and the defendants never get to know the jury, and the jury never really gets to know why they did what they did. That was more the case in Tennessee. And so I was by myself, and the judge effectively stopped my defense. And when you can't put in a defense, it's real hard to.
It's hard to prove
yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's incredible, Franklin. It really is. But you did spend a time then in jail from the Tennessee situation. How much time did you spend there, and when did you finally get out?
I spent a couple of months total. But what I did was the judge had sentenced me to a year in jail and a probation for 7 years to pay $1,000 a month for 7 years. Well, on a Class E felony, you only do about 2 months, and all I had to do was go back to jail and do about 20 days, and I would avoid paying $72,000. So it was paying me several $1,000s a day to go back to jail. So I went back, and I ended up staying 40 days and got out in December of. I guess it was December of '96. And
Franklin, we've got a minute left only, and I wanted to ask you if you can answer this in 30 seconds. If you had prevailed against the IRS in the state of Tennessee, do you think it would have helped the United States, helped us stay clear of the disastrous monetary path that we're now embarked on?
I have no question. We did prevail against the IRS. We just didn't prevail against the state. Yes,
right.
See, they prevented the news of that passing around so that nobody else knew about it. You're just, nobody knew about it. That's just the way it works.
Okay, well, look, we're going to have to leave it go at that because my engineer is telling me my time is out. We're going to get you back again, Franklin, because you have so much to add in terms of your insights into the markets, which is what we usually talk about here. But I wanted to set the table, let people hear about your story. And folks, go to, that is the-moneychanger.com, the-moneychanger.com, and the most dangerous man in the Mid-South is an article that covers all and more than we were able to talk about today. Go there, learn more about that, and Franklin's services as well, because he really provides a lot of information, a daily missive. I think it's free of charge. Go there, learn more about Franklin Sanders, and we're hoping to have him back very soon on this show. Thanks very much, Franklin, for being with us. And again, we'll look to talk to you again very soon.